Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
You got to give me a second because I got to go get some more coffee. It's been a little rough the past few days.
Indeed it has. For me too.
I have been absolutely exhausted. Do you ever get to the point where it's like, getting towards the end of the week and you've just had like day after day of not real great sleep and you're just hitting the wall?
Yes. Absolutely. Actually, I would say this is one of those weeks.
Well, at least we can, share in that misery together, I guess, as we record our little podcast here.
Yes. And in anticipation of our conversation today, I actually went to bed quite early last night, before 10 o'clock. And at 2 a.m., I was still wide awake for no reason. And so when I woke up this morning at 5:15, again, for no reason, I just feel like I got thrown down a bowling alley.
Well, it's super nice that you prepare for a podcast about being tired.
Well, it was the least I could do.
Showing up to being tired.
It was the least I could do.
So considerate. Well, I think it's interesting. Most of us adults seem to live our life in a state where we're like physically tired almost all the time, which seems kind of strange, right? Like why are we doing that?
Well, yes, and I would expand it. I don't even think it's just physically tired. I think we're going through a lot of times where we're mentally tired. Mm-hmm. We can be emotionally tired, physically tired. And I think each one of those is independent of each other, or they can all just collapse at once.
Right. Yeah, this week and last week. Last week, I had another just really busy week, right? I had meetings, I had work, I had kids stuff. Mm-hmm. We were recording video.
Yeah, last week was really tough on you for sure.
And when we went to record our video lesson last week, I was no other way to describe it, but just simply punch drunk. Like I was like, my brain was slow, right? It was extra silly. Like it was just crazy. And that night I just remember thinking like, why am I pushing myself to the absolute limit? Right?
Yeah.
Like what is driving me to like push so hard that week that I actually just kind of felt crappy the whole weekend. I had to recover. It took me the whole weekend to recover.
Yeah. So why did you think you were?
I don't know, because I just felt, admittedly, part of it's my own doing, right?
Part of it. Just part. Very small.
Come on. Okay, I mean, all of it was my own doing.
That's the spirit.
No, but I think I felt, I had, I wanted to make sure I stayed really high output at work. We had a bunch of projects in flight and I wanted to get all that stuff pushed out. And the other thing, I had this idea, I had the Remote Sidekick idea.
Oh, that's right.
Right. So
you should spend just 2 seconds talking about what that is.
So I had this idea for, what I was noticing with my employees is that, take childcare and the work at home and the intermingle of kids and work was really stressing everybody out, including me and my wife. And it's just like, what do you do with your kids if both spouses are working full time, but remote during the day. It's really
Right.
stressful.
It is very
And
stressful.
so what I thought I'd do is hire a babysitter who would watch, who would hang out with your kid for like an hour on Zoom. And she's a teacher, um, and so I came up with this idea and I implemented this idea called Remote Sidekick, where my employees could schedule an hour with the virtual babysitter, um, give give them some relief to focus on work, and make it so their kids weren't just watching Netflix the entire day. So
I would like to
anyway,
also fill in the blank on this piece to say that you did all that in 36 hours. You created a
Yes.
website,
Yeah,
you
that's-
hired somebody, you designed the website, you created a calendar event.
yeah, the software scheduler, yeah. So that's why it's all my own fault. But I had this idea, so I had this big idea last week. So on
Yeah.
top of my normal workload, I had this big idea last week, and and I had to get that out.
Yeah.
Just part of me is just like I had to do it, or else, it just kind of like sits there and turns into my brain. So I did that, and then I had my CEO round, like peer group meeting, my Vistage meeting, and had to prepare a bunch for that. And then you and I were recording. So by the end of the week, I was absolutely done.
Yeah.
So I think on top of me just not getting enough sleep, I also had a really high mental output week,
Yeah.
which fried my brain.
Yeah. I just, in thinking about this, both of us are, I would call high achievers, or certainly we put ourselves in the bucket of must do a lot of stuff and do it extremely well all the time, or else we're flat out failing. And we give other people grace, but I do think that, like for myself, I think that I very much base, when I'm unintentional and unaware, I very much base my worthiness directly connected with my productivity.
Yeah.
And I think that is a common American problem.
Yeah. So digging deeper to this idea that shorting your sleep
Yeah.
and working more is a positive trait,
A badge of honor,
right?
actually.
Yeah, badge of honor. Yeah. Yeah, I have friends that downright brag that, oh no, I only have to sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. And
Yeah.
personally, I have to sleep like 8 or 9 hours a night, or else like I just can't function very well. I mean, to me, like my whole thing is my ability to think, right? Like I am a knowledge worker. I am a creative. Like my brain is the thing that I rely on as my tool of survival, right? So I have to make sure that is well taken care of. And the only way I know how to do that is sleep.
Yeah. Well, and that's the physical manifestation, right? And so being unaware, the physical body will show signs of tiredness, and you'll be able to feel that really quickly. And whether you choose to ignore it or not, not you, but we, I think with physical tiredness, we can tell immediately where we're at on the scale, on the spectrum.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting to listen to the language we use around some of this stuff too. Because like, if you're tired, what should you do if you're tired, Melissa? Well, you should power through, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like you don't notice coworkers that are really tired. You would never say to them, oh, you should go rest.
Right. Well, when I was thinking about this topic, I thought it was really interesting to think about how we deal with children when they're tired. Right. Everyone who's even, whether you have a kid or not, even been around a child, knows that like when they hit their tired limit, like it's all over, right? It's temper tantrums on the floor. It's, it's like they can't even function, right?
Well, I'm
what
53 and I think I'm almost done with that stage. Like I think I can stay off the floor now.
And what do we do with kids, right? We're like, oh, like little Billy's just tired. It's okay. Like we give kids so much grace
Yeah.
when they're tired. And
Yeah.
and instead of punishing them for being tired or nothing like, oh, look at little Billy's tired. He's such a low output, horrible human.
Yeah, right.
We just we coddle them, we get them into bed, we take care of them, and we get
Give
them
them a
back for the next
snack.
day. Yeah. Adults, we don't do that at all. Why don't
No.
we do that for adults?
No.
Because physically we're not different, right?
No. As a matter of fact, one of our colleagues has done sleep studies on the human body and have found that kids that are in their late teens actually require the exact same amount of sleep as an infant. I mean, so I think our physical bodies require different things throughout our whole life cycle. And our ability to connect with that is one thing, but our ability to make good choices for ourselves is another,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's it. We're just talking about like we've just barely touched on the mental fatigue. I think physical fatigue and tiredness is much easier spotted, even if we're not particularly aware. Just because you can't go any further, you just reach a point where that's it. You can't go any further.
Yeah, and externally, you actually do start looking different. Yeah, I mean, you can get bags under your
Yeah.
eyes. Your face kind of gets a little
Your
bit
body
longer.
language.
Your shoulders shrug. You can spot a tired person,
Yeah.
a physically tired person, when you walk up to them. Right?
Yes, that's so true.
But it's a little harder to spot mentally or an emotionally tired person.
Yeah. And I think that mental fatigue is much more pervasive. And I think it's a very sneaky fatigue because we can have real extreme mental fatigue and it builds so slowly that a lot of times I don't think we even acknowledge how mentally exhausted we may be. And then I think depending on if you are somebody who's more aware or not, like if you're high in awareness, but you're also somebody who is a real brain space person, like, yes, I know I'm tired, but it doesn't matter because I have this list of to-dos that I have to do. Otherwise, I've failed myself. I'm not doing the job that I know I can. And I feel like the mental fatigue is really sneaky because we've talked ourselves into believing that we can actually control mental fatigue by powering through.
Yeah. Buckle down.
Yeah. Suck it up. Pull up your bootstraps. And you hear people say stuff like, well, it's okay. I can, I'm going to take some. I was talking with a VP of HR yesterday, a very highly skilled, highly outputted individual. And they literally said, I can't stop. I'm on my emails. I can't leave an email undone in a day. I have to answer everything. And I'm up at 5 because I know there's more and everyone's relying on me. And then they finished that whole topic with, but it's okay. At the end of the month, I'm going to take a couple of days off.
Yeah, I bet there's almost a 0% chance that they take a couple of days off.
But even thinking about the response to that mental fatigue, his own personal response to that mental fatigue was, I'm going to take some time off at the end of the month, weeks from now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to take some time off too, probably when I'm dead.
I mean, yeah, there's like joking language that say, oh, that's okay, we can sleep when we're dead. It's like,
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is really amazing. That Sidekick project that I did last week was really, to me, like my response to observing this mental and emotional fatigue in my team, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew I could sense that the having kids around your work environment all day and really getting towards the end of summer where it's much harder to know what to do with your kids.
Yeah,
Right? I
right.
think all parents know that the end of August is like the
Yeah.
hardest,
Yeah.
like the hardest couple of weeks as a parent.
Yeah.
And the unknown of school was causing such stress, and all I wanted to do was give them a little bit of a break, right? Just the tiniest bit.
And that was born of your real need of the tiniest break.
Yes, I also needed a tiny break, and my wife needed a tiny break.
You went into overdrive to create more when you desperately needed a tiny break. But isn't that interesting? Like I don't say that in judgment. It's like, wow, it was very noble, but it was exhausting.
Yeah, like I need this, like for me, right? I needed it, but my response to it was I have to do this for others, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which caused me to really have a pretty rough week.
Right. Which I think also then leads to emotional fatigue. You know, like we're kind of breaking this down, and in the self-awareness journey, we're always talking about there's 4 bodies. We all have 4 bodies, our spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional bodies. And in order to be truly centered, all 4 of those things have to be in alignment with each other. What we think and say matches what we do and how we feel. And when we're talking about tiredness, like emotional fatigue is something that is much harder to sense for everyone, because I think we're so used to pushing our emotions away or making excuses for them, or certainly not honoring them. You know, I think we're now kind of turning that corner, and I think that everyone's trying to become more aware of that. But emotional fatigue causes all sorts of things to happen that make everything else fall out of alignment. And I think emotional fatigue is born of things that are quieter, but that are much more pervasive in someone's life. Like if you just look at the pandemic, how the pandemic started in March, and here we're making this recording in August or whatever, and you see
No one knows it. The pandemic makes it so no one even knows the month anymore.
exactly. And so now it's been several months, but you can see emotional fatigue now, as it becomes greater and greater. And if someone's operating at a highly emotionally exhausted state, all of those other bodies start to get wobbly. You know, your mental acuity, your tiredness that you feel in your mind. You may do different things physically, like under emotional pressure and stress and tiredness. I think people either can overeat, or they stop eating, or they start over exercising, or they can't exercise, because emotionally it's requiring so much energy that we don't normally admit.
Yeah.
That it's wearing us down.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's really interesting because unlike physical tiredness, I mean, physical, eventually you're just gonna stop, right? Like your body's gonna be like, this is enough. You're you're gonna fall asleep. You're gonna pass out, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But what's like the emotional tiredness equivalent to passing out?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, some people get to that point, right?
They sure do.
But it's a lot longer. It's not like a day or two. They could be months or years.
Right. And the manifestation of emotional tiredness, I think, turns into anxiety, depression, breakdowns, or overextending your reactions to things. Your reactions on the outside become much more expanded or out of context even, because you're not operating from a centered, fully resourced emotional body. And I think that we are seeing a lot of that right now as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, I can kind of observe like even big events, right? There's some big events. I mean, the George Floyd thing in Minneapolis that happened a few months back, right? To me, looking at that as if you just kind of zoom out on it, it's just like here's certainly it's a tragic event in its own right, but it was
Yeah.
just amplified because
Yes.
of the pandemic stuff, and everyone's just so emotionally exhausted, and then
Yeah.
boom, it just explodes, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah. So
completely
true.
understandable, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's very interesting to talk about this, though, because it is really how do we recognize our own signs, of tiredness and fatigue. And I think that by giving ourselves, I think the approach, first of all, in this conversation, I think the approach is really interesting. How you approach yourself in this topic, and how you approach other people as you're noticing and thinking about being tired, right? I think the first thing, and I feel like I always end up coming back to this point, which is we have to give ourselves grace. Like there has to be grace in our tiredness. We have to allow ourselves. For me, for example, like in my own journey of becoming more aware and spending more time in my centered space, I have noticed that it's my reaction to when I recognize myself. When I see myself mentally tired now, for example, not long ago, I would say, it doesn't matter. I have to get this stuff done by the end of today. I don't care if it's 10 o'clock at night. Well, I stop operating well at 3 o'clock. I'm on fire early in the morning and I start wearing down. And by about 3 o'clock, I'm not creative anymore. Like if I can honor how my thinking patterns are and I can be in alignment with my own energy, I can be so productive and so creative.
Yeah.
And if I can recognize, even if I had a planned time when I was going to create something, if I sit down and I have the space to create, but I'm just tired, if I can recognize that and give myself a break and not try to force it, when I do feel more energy and I do feel more alive and awake and centered, everything else flows so much easier and it's so much better.
Yeah.
And faster and just everything. It just is right.
Yeah. Yeah. We want people to be in that state more often than not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Even in sort of in that work context, like we talked about how many people could call up and say, hey, you know what? I'm not working today because I'm just tired. Right? That probably doesn't fly at a lot of companies, right?
You're fired. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
It works in my company. I tell people, hey, if you're tired, if you're not feeling it today, don't work.
Yeah.
Like I don't want your
Yeah.
like half-brained like problem solving and creativity on our work.
Yeah.
Like don't do that.
Right.
I would rather you go take a nap and then get back to a state where you like 100% and then work. Cause the work's way better anyway. Like,
Yeah.
like you can be tired and do a crappy job for 8 whole hours,
Yeah.
or you can probably do something brilliant, fully rested in a quarter of that time.
Yeah. That's right.
So
That's exactly right.
it just seems silly that we're tying those things so closely together.
Well, and again, I think it comes back to the expectation, particularly in the workplace and even at home for some people.
Even at home,
Yeah.
we got kids and laundry and
Yeah, I know.
meals
Yeah.
and you know, and if we're not bringing the kids to sports and we're not doing extra credit with them and we're not doing all this stuff, we're not doing our job as a parent.
Right.
Right.
Yep. So that must have something to do with our worthiness then. If we can't be these great parents and we can't do all these things, then again, it's that productivity equals worthiness mentality.
Yep.
I think that's really what an interesting thing to think about. And I think too, for our listeners that are listening today, it would be very interesting to take your personal inventory. Like as we're talking about being tired physically, mentally, and emotionally, it would be very interesting for us to just think a little bit about that in each one of those areas and to decide how do they impact each other and what are my trigger points where I know I've reached a state of tiredness that is not helpful for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, again, like you were saying, the physical part's much, like, I think that's the first and easiest one. And isn't that interesting? Because we're always talking about your body tells you how you're feeling before anything else does.
Yep.
So there it is again. And then that mental fatigue, it's like the art of creation, the art of just doing our regular work. How does that manifest itself when you're tired? And can you find your own signs, what your trigger points are when you're feeling tired with that? And then the emotional tiredness. Wow, we just don't think about that.
No, that's true.
We just don't think about emotional fatigue. And yet that is the baseline. Our emotions and feelings are the basis for everything.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to think about. And on that note, I'm out of coffee and I gotta go refill.
I guess I kind of am too. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.